Thank you so much for coming, everyone. I'm Carmen Aguirre. I'm a core artist at Electric Company Theater, and I'm here with my longtime friend, colleague, sister, Joelysa Pankanea. So, Joelysa, it's so good to talk to you. I don't think you and I have ever talked in this capacity of
No, we haven't.
me interviewing you. So, can you just tell us? I would love to to get your life story as a composer. Like, how did it all begin for you?
As a composer, well,
Yes.
okay. So I always had an interest in music ever since I was really young, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I would write, these little scratch melodies and things like that. The first toy I ever asked my mother for was a piano, so she was kind of confused about that. And then this was when I was living in Kenya, because I grew up in Kenya, East Africa. And then when I was about 9 years old, we moved to Canada. And at about age 10, my mother started me with piano lessons, which was fantastic. And I excelled really fast. Obviously, I'd waited a long time for that piano. So I excelled quickly. And then a couple of years later, lost the interest in piano lessons and got my first composition teacher at the age of 14. So that's how it started. And then it just never stopped.
So I know that okay, so first of all, your main instrument has been the marimba. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
And
correct.
can you tell us how you got into the marimba? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, the marimba, for anyone that doesn't know, is kind of like a giant wooden xylophone, and you play it normally with four mallets. The marimba was something that I actually started writing for, Carmen, of all things, well before I ever played it. And then when I was in music school, there was a percussion teacher there, a world music teacher and percussion teacher named Sal Ferreris, who was amazing and a great mentor to me later on. But he came to me one day and said, "Why are you writing for this instrument and you've never played it? Don't you think that you might just be a marimba player?" And I went, "What?" And
And
that's how I
how
started.
is it that you were writing for the marimba without playing it? Like tell us about that. How did that happen?
It's kind of like the most sympathetic instrument to be writing for. Is that the right word? Because it's laid out exactly like a piano. And I had just come from the piano, and it was, for me, the marimba was exactly like a piano, but this completely different organic wooden sound, right? So it was an alternative to piano for me at the time.
But I guess my question is, were you hired by somebody to write a composition so that they could play it on the marimba, or
No,
what happened?
no. I'm still talking about when I was young. I was in music school at this time. I was a composition major
Okay.
in music school, and part of the pieces that I would write every term, there was a bigger and bigger body of marimba songs for some reason, just drawn to the instrument.
And how did you even know about the marimba? Like,
That's a good question. I mean, I had been into music for so many years. My assumption is that I've probably come across the thing quite a few times. It is a fixture in the orchestra as well. So I probably saw it in the back of the orchestra a bunch of times. And, we listened to a lot of jazz music and stuff in my house when I was really young. And a lot of that had vibes, which is like the metal version of the marimba, essentially, that plugs in and does all these cool effects. So I did know about the vibes, and the marimba was like the acoustic version of that instrument that really appealed to me.
okay, so you were talking about music school. Which music school did you go to?
I went to VCC.
Uh-huh.
It's a fantastic music school that I think a lot of young people don't really realize how good it is. Because there's like the standard that if you want jazz, you go to CAP. If you want classical, you go to UBC. If you want sort of new music or electronic music, you go to SFU. And most people kind of overlook VCC, which is unfortunate because VCC has all of those programs. And I took them all. I took everything that was possible to take there.
Okay, and you were talking to us about your mentor there, Sal Ferreras, who I've
Mhm.
also known for like 30 years. Um, that got me thinking about mentorships, right? Can you talk to us about that? And
Yeah,
like,
he
yeah.
was a huge mentor for me in my early music start. And he introduced me to a lot of Latin music, which was a huge part of my musical training. And I ended up actually having a Latin jazz band called Los Dias. There were 10 of us. and we would steam up the windows at different restaurants in Vancouver and all
I
over the place.
remember you very well. I used to dance to you. I used to dance to those, yes. And Sal is from Puerto Rico, just for people who are listening, right? Sal is a renowned musician, your mentor and teacher from Puerto Rico. So yes, I remember dancing to your band. It was excellent.
Yeah, thanks, Carmen. Yeah, he was most of the influence for almost everybody in that band. We were all students coming out of VCC at the time. And then after that, when I started segueing into theater, then I found new mentors and other people that sort of came in and helped me with the theater side of things, because I walked into theater green, completely
Okay, so
green.
tell us how you went, what happened? How did you get into theater?
Oh my gosh. You want to know about like the very first thing?
Yeah, like how does a person go from like VCC and their own salsa band playing around town to composing for theater? What happened?
Okay, I'll tell you what happened. So yeah, I had this salsa band and I was a percussionist at the time. And then somebody asked me to be the percussionist in a theater band. And at the time, I thought that sounded like the lamest thing ever. Like, well, that just sounds so lame. And I said no. And then they asked me again, and I ended up saying yes, because I thought,
Okay,
well, I haven't done this.
Hold up.
Yeah.
Why did you think it was lame?
I thought it was lame because I thought theater was super cheesy. Because in music school, it's the one thing they don't give you any education on actual theater and musical theater. And had I had some of that education, I would have seen that there are plays out there with some seriously kick-ass music. But I just hadn't been exposed to it. So I thought it was like very cheesy Andrew Lloyd Webber kind of, you know what I mean, right? So that's kind of what I thought. So I walked into this room, the first rehearsal, and it was a circus, full on, right? There was like people hanging from the ceiling. Yes, people hanging from the ceiling. Yep, the Leaky Heaven Circus. And I walked into the first rehearsal, and it was a complete gong show. Like there were dogs and children everywhere, and props and people hanging off the ceiling. Like it was insane. And I thought, how am I going to get through this? And by the end of that first rehearsal, I had made the decision that I wanted to compose for theater. Because for me, the thing that was missing for me for composition was the story. And I fell in love and I never turned back. I quit the band and never turned back.
Okay, so the story. Okay, so I'm just aware that it's already 5:12. Oh my God, we have to be done at 5:30 and we haven't even gotten into the composer-director relationship.
Okay.
Okay, so I know that you worked for about 10 years with one of my best friends in the world, Jimmy Tate, which is how I met you, because Jimmy Tate and I were roommates. And he brought you over to the house over and over and over again when I met you and when you were 19. So can you tell us about the composer-director relationship? For example, you don't have to stick to that one, but just for example, since that's one that you had for 10 years, how that worked. Like take us from the very beginning. Like what is the first thing that you do? What conversations do you have? How do you decide what you're going to compose? How much say does the director have, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I maybe won't stick to the Jimmy one because it's such a unique collaboration. And when I first got together composing things for theater with him, I didn't know much about theater, and he helped me a lot about learning about that. So if I fast forward maybe to like the halfway point, I can talk about things from there, because I really started to notice, I think there's like the behavioral person inside me, like a behavioral analyst, that was always really interested in those conversations between the director and myself, and how I could give them what they want when they didn't have a musical language, for example, right? So that conversation has been happening for me for a very long time. So to do this workshop now is just amazing. But I think one of the most important things is how you approach things right from the very beginning in the first meeting, that very first music meeting, and the things that you look for, or if a director doesn't know what they have to offer, it's about asking the right questions, because they have more information than they think they do sometimes. And it's about finding that information from them. So asking about things like music placement, or if they have no idea, where the silence is. Where do you definitely need it to be silenced so that I don't put music on top of that? You know, what kind of instrumentation is it? What kind of feel is it? Is there diegetic music in this play? Is there Foley in this play? These are the kinds of things I think of right off the bat.
Okay, can you talk to us a bit about the difference between sound design and composition? and maybe the similarities as well.
Sure, yeah. The roles they do cross over quite a bit these days. But technically speaking, the role of a composer is to create original music, including all of the backtracks. So if there's instrumentalists, they write everything for all instrumentalists, all vocalists. And that includes vocal numbers and all the underscoring for a play, but it's all original. For sound design, it's a little bit different. A sound designer tends to create, or their role really is to create an electronic bed of sound that accompanies a piece, and that can include, drones, stings, buttons, musical interludes, or transition music, things like that. But it's supposed to be kind of an electronic thing. Sometimes sound designers will be asked to compose, and that does happen. And I think that that's totally fine and fair, as long as they're sort of being paid for that role then. And vice versa. I've done a lot of composing where they've also asked me to do the sound design as well. So the crossover happens quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what is your ideal, like if you had like a utopic kind of experience in mind of composing for a world premiere of a play, for example, what would that look like from beginning to end?
Well, I think I did that with Anywhere But Here and You, but anyways.
Oh, okay.
that was pretty awesome. That's
okay. And why? And just so everybody knows, like Joelysa, I mean, not only, I mean, you also composed rap tunes for that play with, with Shad. I mean, not that Shad was the composer, but that he co-wrote those rap pieces, the lyrics, and you composed rap, you composed an entire score for that play. So tell us about how you even like wrap your brain around something like that, and knowing that it's a world premiere, it's never been done before. The script is changing every day. The script is changing even through tech.
Yeah, I think there are two different skill sets that a composer who is a film composer has, and a composer who is a theater composer has. And I think the main difference is that a film composer comes into a set thing on the screen. They know what everything looks like. They know what the timing of everything is, and they're laying down the perfect mood for every moment. Whereas when you're composing for theater, you are literally walking in with no visuals having been created yet. You've only had conversations about feel and mood or style of music and things like that. So you have to be kind of ready. And going back to the raps and what we did with Anywhere But Here, and also some of the Latin percussion that we had in there, like this is one of the things, Carmen, that I think is key for any young composer, because I was very lucky to learn this early on, is to be super versatile. Like the first thing I did after studying classical and jazz was I went in and started studying world music, as much world music as I could. And if I hadn't have done that then at this point in my career, I can't even tell you how many different plays with like Greek music or EDM or 80s Britpop that I wouldn't have been able to do because I didn't have the skill set.
Wow. Okay, so let's pretend that let's go from the very first meeting, right? I know that you have also composed for me when I've been directing, right? So I know that for me, I know I'm going to have a meeting with you. I know the script inside out, presumably. And I go through the script and literally mark down every single spot that I think there should be music, like original compositions, and more or less what I think it should sound like. That's what I do. And then you and I get together. You have basically done the same thing. Is this correct? You've gone through the script and kind of made notes, and then we compare notes, and then we decide on things. Is that true?
Yes. Yes, that is true.
So then we decide on that, and that usually takes at least 2 hours, right? That first meeting of just going through the script and deciding, and then you go away, and what do you do?
So then I go away and I try to compose the whole arc of the play. So what that means is taking into account every scene and every minute journey that happens along the way, but incorporating a large arc that is the emotional journey that the audience is going to go on, right? So sometimes if things get like when we decide that, oh, we had a piece here and we have to remove it, for me, it means also stitching back the arc. So if I've removed a piece here, so how do I still seamlessly have my arc throughout the whole play? But that's what I'm looking to do, you know, as successfully as I can in the context of theater, which is you know, it's an art form that's constantly in flux. So things are constantly changing. But you have to just sort of be very malleable and be ready to bend creating theater.
Yeah. And a lot of times when you're doing compositions, Joelysa, like the actors are expected to sing and to vocalize, right? So that means that often you are also the musical director. So can you talk to us about like, what is a musical director? How do you approach it? And so often, because you're not doing musicals, so you don't have musical theater performers, you have like regular actors like me who are not singers, and you're so great at directing people like me to sing. How do you, what is a musical director in, what is the difference, right, between that and a composer, for example? And when you're composing for people like me who are not actual singers, how do you do that? And then how do you direct us?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Yeah, a musical director is a go-between for the composer and the performers. That's how I see it. And I've also been in the role of musical directing my own music. So I think to be a really good musical director, you have to have a different set of skills. You've got to know about vocal training. You've got to be able to hear stresses in people's voices and have incredible audiation skills. But you have to be able to hear the stresses inside people's voices to be able to look after the actors, to say, oh, you're very tired. You need to take a couple of days before you come back to singing at this volume, or just taking care, you know? Their job is to get the performance ready for the stage. The tricky thing is that if you have a composer that is also the musical director, they've got to be really good at switching hats. So when I walk into a room and I'm musical directing, that is the job, if you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
I can't go, this is not an opportunity for me to go in and then go, ooh, I heard another line, maybe can we change that? And like, there's none of that. The composing is gone. You're now musical directing. And the whole purpose of that is communication with the director and execution with the actors. So when you're dealing with actors that don't sing, which I've done a lot of, first of all, most people can sing. I have come across a couple of people that haven't, but I mean a couple. And I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of actors who sing and don't sing. I think that for any, I guess, musical director maybe out there who's wondering, like, I think the key is to also double people up. So if you notice, you know, read your crowd. And if you see that somebody is very nervous about singing a certain part, you know, it's a good idea to double them up with somebody beside them that's a slightly stronger singer. So they feel like they have that support. And you'll see that eventually they'll just start coming out and singing it and feeling totally great about their own parts. But that also comes with the musical director's skill of making sure that you create a room environment where the actors feel safe and comfortable to sing and make mistakes.
Wow, amazing. Now I'm noticing that it's 5:23, and I wonder if there's any questions. And if not, don't worry about it. I have a whole bunch of other questions, but I thought that, okay, so on that note, like how to communicate, can you tell us like the wrong thing to do? Like what should a director not do in relationship to a composer? What is bad communication?
Okay, I'm gonna go right for the jugular and go for
Yeah.
the worst. Maybe just don't ask a composer to like rip off a song. That's the worst. And what I mean by that is not like, hey, we want something like this song. No, when a director gives you this song and then they're like, we need this song, but we are not paying for the royalties for this song. So they're asking you to literally just rip it off and kind of recreate the exact same song. That is a little bit, that gets into some gray territory where, you know, ethics get involved and, you know, so I'd say that number one.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
that sounds like yeah, I can't imagine doing that. But since you're giving that example, I'm assuming some people have done that, which is Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I have seen lots of different requests, and they're all good. They're all fine, except for maybe that one.
Now you also mentor, like I remember when you did, oh God, was it Anonymous that you brought
Yes.
on your assistant?
I think that was an assistant. It was a young guy who wanted some mentorship, but I brought him on for Anywhere But Here.
Okay, because that young person who you've been mentoring for a while, what is advice that you have as a mentor when you are let's pretend you're mentoring me. You would never mentor me because I know nothing about music, but let's pretend I did. But you know, what do you do when you start mentoring somebody?
That is so complex. I try to literally teach them everything I've got. So I like the sort of longer mentorships. Like I'll take on one young person and keep them with me for a little while. I think that's the best way instead of just bringing them in on one show and then sort of letting it go. But I'll go over everything from music placement, sound design, what would a certain scene require, and why would it not require these kinds of things. How to source out Foley, that is Foley meaning just sounds like a cup going down or any of those kinds of everyday sounds. Sourcing out Foley that makes sense inside a play, because some things are at a certain time period. How do you figure that out? How important is it that the audience hears it from there? So I did definitely talk a lot about Foley. I would give them a little bit of a rundown on speaker placement as well, because that's pretty important to know how to really encapsulate the space with speakers. And I would also teach them how to use QLab, because that's one thing that is really overlooked. Like you'll end up hiring somebody in the, a musician that you really want to work with, but you're bringing them into a theater setting, and everything that we run in the theater, light, sound, everything is off QLab. So if they don't know how to create a QLab file for their cues, that's a big one.
Okay, so tell us, what is QLab? What is that?
QLab is a program that is standard in all theaters, I believe. Maybe Clayton knows something different, but I believe that all theaters use this one program to run all sound cues and lighting. So everything is programmed into a session on that program, and the stage manager then plays all the music in the play at certain points and through certain cues based on that QLab file. So if the QLab file is wrecked or broken or isn't built properly, it's just a bad scene. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there's a question. Have you ever worked in opera or dance?
I have worked in dance. I have not worked in opera. I've created a couple of pieces that had dance in them. One of them was actually Reframed. I worked with a whole set of dancers for Reframed. And if you haven't seen that, I'm sure you can find the whole film on Electric Company Theater's website. But dance is super fun. I think that I'd love to do more dance, because I've always had a really great experience with choreographers. So yeah, if this question's coming from a choreographer, let's collab.
And would you do opera?
I would, although opera isn't something that I don't feel a huge draw to opera, but like the Leaky Heaven Circus 20 years ago, I hadn't done theater. So I don't know what opera has to offer me yet, and I'm not done, so it'll probably happen.
Right. Yes. Now we only have 1 minute left, so why don't you plug, like, you don't have to plug, but tell us what you're doing.
I am talking to a bunch of beautiful people on Zoom. And I have a couple of projects coming up. I'm doing a featured documentary for Smayakila Films with the brilliant and talented director Banshee Hanous. And I'm also going to Victoria to do Serving Elizabeth at the Belfry Theatre.
Right. Yeah, and you're perfect for that, because that takes place in Kenya.
It does. I actually get to write some Kenyan music for it. So I'm very excited about that.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. That just went so quickly.
It did. Thanks, Carmen. Thanks, everybody.
You. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I mean, how often do we get to hear from a composer for theater? So thank you so much, Joelysa.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you, everybody, for tuning in on this gorgeous afternoon. And hopefully you will come to Joelysa's, let's plug Joelysa's workshop.
The workshop is really, really exciting. And it's something that, like, as I said, I've been thinking about the director composer relationship for so many years. And I don't think that it could have been created at any other time than now. I kind of needed like that decade of experience behind thinking of this before I could come forward and feel like I had valuable things to offer. But the workshop is for directors and anyone who just wants to hear about things from the music side, from their sound department, and also how to communicate with the music department a little bit better.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks again so much, Joelysa. And
My pleasure.
yeah, I hope everybody goes to your workshop. I think it'll be amazing. Joelysa is an incredible person to work with. I've worked with her many times and she's just amazing in the room. And I always learn so much
Oh,
working with you. So
thank
thank
you,
you.
Carmen. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.